Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a real honor to be rising today in the home of the Nuu-chah-nulth people on the unceded traditional territory of the Hoopa-Chesed and Sishat people. Mr. Speaker, I'm here rising again to talk about plastics and the impact of plastics choking our ocean and the species that live in our marine economy. Mr. Speaker, someone from a coastal community, I can tell you firsthand the impact that it's having on our coastlines. And we have the longest coastline in the world. And this is an urgent issue that the government of Canada needs to take even more seriously. And their obligation to the environment needs to be backed up with the words that they've used at the United Nations and their commitments there, but also at the G7 when they hosted the G7. They had a commitment at the Ocean Plastic Strategy on the G7 and their commitment around eliminating and reducing plastic pollution. Now, Bill C-204 is presented by the member from York Simcoe, and I really appreciate his efforts on this bill and certainly his enthusiasm. The House certainly knows the position of the NDP on plastics well. In fact, this is my 87th time rising on the issue related to plastics, and it's because it's an urgent issue, Mr. Speaker, and we can't take half measures to tackle this issue. Back in 2017, I presented motion M151 to the House to develop a national strategy to combat plastic pollution. Thousands of Canadians reached out to their MPs to support this motion. We had many stakeholders from my riding and other coastal communities that rallied together to support the motion, which received unanimous support in the House, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate all members from all parties supporting that. And I certainly want to highlight the work of my former colleagues, Murray Rankin and also Nathan Cullen, and of course Megan Leslie before that had done really important work when it relates to plastics. And I want to thank the current member for Victoria and Vancouver Kingsway and Windsor for their tireless efforts and their work on plastics to protect our coastal communities. Because of this work, the government has made some efforts and steps in terms of banning certain types of plastics, such as grocery bags and straws and plastic cutlery that will come into effect this year. They made commitments around a derelict and ghost and abandoned fishing gear. This is a start, but we have a ton of work to do. And when it comes to this issue being a priority for Canadians, there was a release that just came out the other day, Mr. Speaker, and this is from Oceana, and the polling results that Abacus Data commissioned that found that 95% of Canadians are concerned about the impact plastic pollution has on our ocean. So people across our country, they want to see real action when it comes to tackling this really important threat to our ecosystem. When we go across the country and we hear about the concerns from people, we hear stories about people seeing plastic washing up upon their shores. We don't have the responsibility that's in place. There's no extended producer responsibility still, Mr. Speaker. The government's focused on a circular economy. The amount they're looking at reducing in their ban for this year of the 6 single-use plastics only covers a fraction of 1% of the amount of plastic that is currently being used. In fact, Canadians are laggards, Mr. Speaker. In 2016, only 9% of plastics were recycled in Canada. 86% ended up in the landfill, 4% were incarcerated, and 1% was actually released directly into the environment. So we're not doing enough. And we need to do a lot more here in Canada as well. We need to obviously stop the export of plastics abroad. The importance of today's bill is real, but it's also a half step. And honestly, Mr. Speaker, we need to be just realizing that we've signed on to the Basel Convention and we need to actually honor our agreement and commitment there. So in terms of this bill, Canada in 2018 shipped more than 44,000 tons of plastic waste to other countries because of our inability to recycle that plastic ourselves. And much of that plastic ended up in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. We certainly know it ended up in the Philippines. As you know, I rose in the House back in 2017 and 2018 on what became an international embarrassment as our waste was sitting in the Philippines, in Manila, and they wanted it sent back to Canada, and for good reason, Mr. Speaker. A lot of these developing nations don't have the capacity and the infrastructure to recycle and dispose of the plastic that we've been sending there. And we have children living in plastic slums on the other side of the world because of plastic being shipped by Canada. You can find Canadian labels in most of these plastic slums in their rivers and in their waterways. And it's something that we should all be embarrassed about as Canadians. So we need to take this very seriously. And we know that the Liberals have really dismissed the idea of banning plastic waste exports. They've again signed on to the Basel Convention, but we know that there's loopholes and there's ways that it's escaping through the United States and other countries that we are still shipping plastics to. So their strategy is not enough. They need to adhere to their international commitments. And we know that that if we take action now, we are going to see result. Now, I want to just read a quote from Ashley Wallace from Oceana. She says, Canada has an opportunity to lead in the fight to end the global plastic disaster. There's public appetite for stronger federal action. Now is the time to meaningfully reduce plastic pollution production and use including banning more of the unnecessary harmful single-use plastics that are choking our life-sustaining oceans. And I couldn't agree more, Mr. Speaker. I know we're talking about banning the shipment of plastics, but we actually need to eliminate the unnecessary use of single-use plastics in our country. And we need to, of course, stop shipping our plastics to other countries. Now, when it comes to the Basel Convention, clearly our country is not following through with our commitments at the Basel Convention. We need the government to be listening to this. We wouldn't be talking about this bill if Canada was actually honoring its commitment. We're a signatory to the original Basel Convention, which sets restrictions on shipping waste to the developing world. But we've refused to ratify parts of that agreement and stopping the plastic waste exports because the government knows that it would be not be in compliance of this. And so we're wanting the Liberals to just stop offering just these words that they're committed to it and actually take real action on this. And Mr. Speaker, we have not heard the government of Canada talk about extended producer responsibility, work with the companies that are creating plastics and redesigning it. I think about Nathan Cullen when he was the member of Parliament for Skeena-Bulkley Valley, and obviously now he's a BC cabinet minister. He put forward a tabled a bill so that we could redesign packaging so that it would ban the design of plastics that couldn't be recycled and reused, Mr. Speaker. I do want to read another quote from the Oceana release the other day, and they cited that 2/3 of Canadians polled support expanding the ban to other harmful plastic products, including hot and cold drink cups, cigarette filters, and all forms of polystyrene. All forms of polystyrene. I want to say that again, Mr. Speaker. These items and many others are commonly found littered in the environment, including our waterways, yet they're missing from the proposed ban list. This is despite recent scientific modeling confirming we need to significantly reduce plastic waste generation, not just increase recycling. If we have a chance to fighting chance of curbing the fatal blow of plastic into our waterways, we need to do this. And so, Mr. Speaker, I could speak all day, as you can imagine, on plastics. And again, I see it firsthand. I do appreciate my colleague bringing this bill forward as his private member's bill. The more we talk about this issue, the better. But we do need the government to stop talking on their end, and they need to take greater action, because these lofty goals, again, banning 6 single-use plastics, that is going to make a difference of 1%, Mr. Speaker. Again, we are laggards. We use more plastic than any other developed country in the world, Mr. Speaker, per capita. And that has to change. I know the government wants to create this circular economy idea, but that still means doubling plastic use by 2035 if we continue on this trajectory, Mr. Speaker. We need to reduce and eliminate our use of plastics. And we need to obviously recycle what we're doing here in Canada instead of shipping it overseas. And we need to honor the Basel Convention. I want to thank my colleague. We'll be supporting this to get to committee, and we'll be bringing forward amendments there to improve this legislation. I hope you'll be welcome to those changes that we'll be bringing forward. And again, I want to thank him for bringing this bill forward, and I want to thank all my colleagues in the House for talking about this very important issue. But let's take some action. Let's make some changes so that children abroad are not living in plastic slums because plastic waste coming from Canada is choking out their waterways, their environment. They deserve better. The earth in the future deserve better. Thank you.
Resuming debate.